Hi everybody, I am Francisco Gil-White and I am here interviewing Rוחי Avital, who is one of the anchors here at Arutz Tov. Very nice to see you.
Nice to see you in person.
In person, Rוחי. I understand that you have a lot of experience participating in the movements of what they call the Israeli right, which I prefer to call the patriot movements. I think that's a better label because the right has negative connotations for many people in the West, and I've seen it. Unfortunately, they map those negative connotations onto what they call the Israeli right, simply because that label is used.
Right.
And I actually think that this is not very helpful. I think I don't think everybody on the right is a good patriot, but I think people like you certainly are called. They call you the right,
the hard right, yeah.
And there is certainly one part of the right that I would say is definitely patriotic and working very hard.
Well, actually, in Israel here we call ourselves the national camp, not the rightist camp, but the national camp. Not ultra-nationalist, but national.
Right. So national patriotic, it's in the same semantic space.
The same
so that's
family,
good.
right, exactly.
Okay, so the left around the world has been taught since the late 60s, 70s, they've been taught, this is what Marxist professors did in Western universities all over. They taught their students that if you're the little guy, you're always right. So if they can convince you that one side is smaller, weaker, has less territory, fewer weapons, whatever the dimension of smaller, weaker, then automatically they're right no matter what they do.
Exactly.
And the other side, the bigger side, the one that has more land, perhaps more weapons, whatever, they're always wrong. You don't have to interpret their behavior. You don't have to look at evidence. The minute you label them as small and big, automatically you're supposed to know who has justice on their side, and you're not supposed to think at all about what they're doing.
That's what Professor Gad Saad famously calls suicidal empathy.
Right.
That this is what's happening all over the world. In Europe especially, we're seeing with the admission of millions of Muslim immigrants who do not share the cultural ethics and values of the host countries and are destroying it from within.
Yes.
And this was just getting a foothold then in the 70s and 80s. Right. And this was very typical of the Israeli left as well. The Israeli left created a new religion. A
secular religion.
Jews, there's no such thing as a Jew who's not religious. It's not always Judaism. If it's not Judaism, then they have to pick another religion. There's something inherently religious about the Jewish soul, as a generalization, of course. And that's why we see in history, for example, in the communist movement in Russia and the Bolshevik movement, we see an inordinate and disproportionate amount of Jews among the leaders of the Communist Party, Trotsky and so on and all.
Because they were substituting one religion with another religion.
Exactly, and fanatically so.
Right.
And the religion of the leftist Jew in Israel became peace. Peace became the most important value beyond everything else, beyond life actually. Whereas in Jewish religion and in Judeo-Christian society, I would say this also to groups and journalists, if I were to ask you, what is the most important value? Any of you, from Europe, from America, whatever, I think 100% of you would say a human life. But if a person can kill their sister or mother over family honor, then obviously honor is a more important value than human life.
Right.
Even of your own family.
Right.
So I think, just to make sure that we're on the same cultural page, we are not all on the same cultural page.
Perhaps to say that the most important value for the left became peace, maybe that's a distortion too, because to me it feels more accurate to say that capitulation became their main value, not peace, because the things they do don't promote peace at all. what they do is they strengthen the position of the enemies of the Jewish state, enemies who in fact say out loud that they want to commit genocide against the Israeli Jewish population. So it seems to me that the central value is not really peace. Peace is sort of the marketing excuse for the things they do, the sort of the veneer. But what the real value is pleasing the anti-Semites, or pleasing the people who have a grievance against Israel. Whatever they demand, we'll give it to them, because the only objective is to appease them. So maybe that's the word. The real value is not peace, but appeasement.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I'm not sure it makes a big difference, because I think it's basically the same idea. Because the whole peace movement was based on Israel giving up land for peace.
Right.
And you couldn't convince them with the facts. You could not confuse them with the facts.
Right.
No matter what happened, and even now, no matter what happens. I mean, you see it now. October 7th was a huge wake-up call. There were people who didn't need that wake-up call.
Right.
The people on the patriotic national right camp didn't need that wake-up call. We've been saying it for many, many years.
Yes.
Everybody on our side, to go back to the disengagement, or we were talking about the disengagement.
So how did that affect you?
So at that time, it was really to see Israeli society, a very ugly side of Israeli society. It's really, really a tragic irony. I use the word irony really cautiously, that October 7th came and attacked those very kibbutzim in the south of Israel that rejoiced at the disengagement.
Right.
When they were the first to suffer. They were the first to bear the consequences of that. But
so in other words, just so that everybody understands, because some people who are not very familiar with Israel will end up hearing this, the people who established kibbutzim right next to the Gaza border,
known as the Gaza periphery or envelope, sometimes.
Those agricultural communities. The members of those agricultural communities were people on the left, mostly.
Very much so.
Right, who had a very strong ideology about finding some kind of peaceful arrangement with the people that live in Gaza, with the Arabs of Gaza, and so forth. And therefore, when in 2005, Ariel Sharon decided that Israel would evacuate itself from Gaza, and that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would forcibly remove the Jews who lived there, because the Arabs don't tolerate Jews in the land that they are allowed to govern, right? This is a very important point.
Very important point.
So all of that movement was strongly supported by the people who lived in the agricultural communities right around Gaza. They were strong leftists who believed the Gaza disengagement, which was an experiment, right? We're going to try out Arab self-government in Gaza, right? I guess the idea that was sold to the Israelis was we're going to show the world that we mean business when we talk peace. So we're going to show that we ask for nothing. We will give them the territory of Gaza.
And they swore that if one single object, at least to say a missile, flew in from those territories, they would immediately respond, of course, a promise that was never kept.
Never kept. So the people who most believe in that experiment established agricultural communities right around Gaza. They even had programs to meet Arabs from Gaza. They were employing many Arabs from Gaza in their own agricultural communities, etc. Those were the people that the Gaza terrorists killed, right? Those are the people that the Hamas terrorists came out and killed.
Not just killed, tortured.
Tortured to death.
Raped, burned to death, parents in front of children, children in front of parents, in the most horrific ways possible.
But before that, when the disengagement happened, these people didn't wake up. They didn't listen to the right.
No, they were cheering on. This was a moment, not a moment, but it was a time of a huge lack of empathy in Israel for the people. What's the big deal? You have to move. You'll move. A lot of people move. That's all it was to them, to move, without understanding that a person, especially in agricultural communities, but anywhere, you have roots in the land itself. This is the land of Israel.
But what was your position when the disengagement happened?
I was vehemently against it, and I participated in a lot of the demonstrations against it.
Okay. The argument of these demonstrators, including yourself, was that if Israel evacuated Gaza, Gaza would become a giant terrorist problem for the state of Israel. The argument on the other side was, well, look, it's very expensive to police Gaza. We're losing a few soldiers all the time in Gaza. It's just very complicated. It's not worth it. What are we doing there? Why don't we get out? Just let them have Gaza.
It's actually the same argument that was used in Lebanon when Israel had a periphery along the border. And
it's too expensive. Let's get out.
Soldiers were killed occasionally there, and it's not worth it, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But it all catches up with you.
But the argument on your side was, yes, of course there's a cost to holding Gaza, but the cost of evacuating Gaza is going to be infinitely larger. And October 7th, not only October 7th, because there have been missiles raining down on Israeli civilians.
Campaigns when what we call rounds of fighting where Israeli soldiers were killed.
So it's not just October 7th, but October 7th was the most dramatic demonstration that you guys were right. That nothing could be more costly than not controlling Gaza.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But what I see, and what a lot of other people see, who are defenders of Israel, we see something that looks like a madhouse. So we see the overwhelming majority of the media in Israel, certainly all the very big media in Israel, behaving as though they are getting paid by the enemies of Israel.
You couldn't put it better. It's like as if they are Hamas spokespeople.
Exactly. I always hear that the anti-Israel movements in the West and the media keep calling Israel an apartheid state, right? And to me, an apartheid state means that because the apartheid comes from the original situation in South Africa, where you had a tiny minority that was preventing the majority from having any rights, right? But what I see is here that the majority, which is the Israeli Jews, has fewer rights than the Arab minority. I'll tell you why. In Israel, if a Jew kills another Jew, the murderer is going to stay in prison. Or kills an Arab, will stay in prison. But if an Arab kills a Jew, all they have to do is wait for the Arabs to commit another crime, which is to take some hostages, and then there will be a negotiation and the Arab murderers come out of prison. So that means that Israel is an apartheid state, but it's an apartheid state against the Israeli Jews.
Against Israeli Jews.
We also see, I've seen signs, because I've driven all over Judea and Samaria, Yehuda and Shomron.
The red signs.
I've seen the red and yellow signs that say, no Israeli citizen is allowed beyond this point. They put those signs
for fear of death.
For fear of death. It says the Israeli state will not protect you if you go beyond this point. And they put these signs at the entrance of Arab villages. So if Israeli citizens don't have freedom of movement in their own country, it's an apartheid state against them.
Against them. No, I couldn't put it better myself. You're absolutely right. There's a really perverse morality involved here. We see it also in Western countries where, certain minorities, let's say in Scandinavia, we know that the Muslim minorities commit most of the crime, the especially violent crime in Scandinavia, especially rape, right?
Sure. Well, we had the scandal of the rape gangs in Britain.
Right, just exactly. Recently. And you're not allowed to say who they are because you're this made-up term called Islamophobic.
Exactly. Right. If you mention that the rape gangs were Muslim, then suddenly you're Islamophobic.
We get the same thing here also that sometimes there's certain like code words that if you know how to read them, then you know it means Arab. So they'll say tz'irim, young people, young men, and they won't say what ethnic group they belong to, but we understand. But if, for example, they're Jewish or, God forbid, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, then that will appear in the newspaper.
Of course.
Right.
Ruchi, thank you so much for joining us. This was a very interesting interview.
Thank you.
Goodbye.